Welcome back to He's on Fire podcast.
He's on fire!
I am really glad we are returning this week with better news than last week. Although I'm still going to get picky about the 90 plus yards of penalties that we had again. But everything turned out okay. 35-13, over 400 yards of offense again. And we have our special guest tonight, Ralph Amsden. He's going to be joining us, talking all about the Arizona State Sun Devils and what we need to do to continue to have the season we believe that we have. So we're going to discuss it all tonight. He's on Fire podcast. Let's go.
Urbanchi sets, looks up, and it is caught! Down strong! Blitz coming, Matthews, Palmer extending the play, crosses the field, Larry Fitzgerald. There he scores, it's over! It's insane! To the 4-yard line. Crowder looking, throws it, alley-oop, oh! He puts it down! He puts it down! They're getting a little wobbly. The downfield shot, ASU! A foot race! They won't get it! Center field! The Diamondbacks are world champions!
That song just hits a little different after a win, doesn't it? Last week, I didn't want to hear that shit. That was absolutely horrid, especially after what we all had to put up with. But we are finally back on the winning column. We are 3-1. Everything seems to be okay right now in Sun Devil Nation. You know, I've checked the Facebook posts and I've checked the Twitter accounts on people, and everybody was very worried to start everything off. But I want to bring in our guest speaker now, Ralph Amsden, to the podcast. He is a co-host on Pac-12 Apostles. He has his own podcast, The Devil Train. He has about 1,000,001 more things that he does as well, too. Ralph, how you doing, man?
I'm good. I appreciate you having me on. Hope everybody's in a better mood than last week.
Last week was an absolute train wreck for everybody, including me. Not so much Joe Healy, not so much Brad Denny, considering that their expectations might not have been as high as other people's. Mine were super high. I listened to your podcast. You said yours was super high. And this Colorado game absolutely ended up being a huge game, not just like for the season, for Herm Edwards in general. So let's get right into this game. What did you see to start out with in the first half from the Sun Devils? Give me some highlights or whatever's on your mind.
I think the expectation coming in was that you had a Colorado team with 20 straight drives where they hadn't produced any points. And so, you know, if you're going to come out and let them score right away, then, you know, then I think you're going to give everybody room to get very nervous. But going up 14-0 was, I think that was extremely important, even though, you know, it wasn't the prettiest football in the world. Jaden Daniels is still running a lot more than I think most people would be comfortable with. I think you'd want, you know, his runs to come on some of those design runs that they actually had for him in the second and third quarters, than to see him scrambling all the time, not be able to find open receivers or anything like that. But to see Johnny Wilson have a positive play early on, to see Curtis Hodges have a positive play early on, starts to get the monkey off your back on a lot of the negative stuff that happened last week in Provo.
I completely agree, but I gotta point out the 90 yards and penalties. Now, we had more yards, but less penalties than Colorado. Colorado had more timely penalties than we had, obviously. What are your thoughts just on the penalty situation from where we've been at all season to right now, including this game?
I don't necessarily correlate penalty yards with a lack of success. Sometimes a lot of penalty yards is indicative of a team that is actually able to produce a lot of yards, that has a lot of explosive plays. Obviously, a couple of big penalties came negating long DJ Taylor returns. I think that's going to be stuff that you want to cut down on. This team has probably been most inconsistent on special teams above any other thing that they have going on. And so I also noticed DJ Taylor's a very emotional player. threw about a 20-second tantrum when a kickoff went over his head, and he's not going to be very happy with his teammates if they're cutting back on some of those great returns he has when he actually gets the ball in his hands. So, I mean, the targeting call that they got Green kicked out of the game. I mean, that's a type of stuff like that's gonna happen. I watched the rest of the Pac-12 games. I'm actually watching USC and Oregon State right now, and Oregon State is killing USC. And you watch some of the penalties that happen across the conference, and I would say that it was pretty much par for the course for ASU today. They weren't going to eliminate everything, but the special team stuff is where it's really concerning, because it's just again and again and again and again, and you might cost yourself a touchdown if it keeps up.
That's absolutely going to happen, because he looks electric. And going back to the penalties real quick, one of them was on Case Hatch too. I think that was the block in the back, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And how many times do you see Case Hatch actually committing penalties? So I hope that's a one-off, but the special teams is an issue. The only Todd Graham holdover right now as well. I just want to throw that out there as a little tidbit. You look at the rest of the game, and I think the average Fickle fan is going to go into this and say, you know what? We were supposed to win this game. We were supposed to go in and kick their ass. You said it on your podcast that the fact that it's a 14.5-point line should be a slap in the face to the Sun Devils. So you said something around those margins. And
yeah. Didn't I say it should be about like 20.5 or something like that?
21 sounds like, but 20.5, somewhere around there. Absolutely.
What'd they win by? 22?
22.
There you go.
Ralph Stradamus at it again.
It's just that they didn't have the ability to move the ball. And I think I had seen that they were midway through the fourth quarter at about 170 yards total offense, and that feels about right. And a lot of it came on scrambles, and you can't always account for stuff like that. Brendan Lewis is an athletic quarterback, but they're just not finding a way to scheme their wide receivers open, and you're not going to find a way to do it against the disciplined Arizona State defense as long as they actually are disciplined.
And we actually looked a little bit disciplined tonight. It really looked like things changed to a point, especially on the defensive end. And obviously, offensively, we were able to communicate. So I didn't expect to see those 3, 4, 5 blunder plays, plus however many offensive line blunder penalties that we had. We did, however, outgain them 439 to 250, passing 272 to 67. Granted, 30 of those and a touchdown was from Ricky Pearsall. Rushing, they actually outgained us 183 to 167. Ralph, do you attribute that to the defensive line, good play scheming? Why was Colorado able to gash us, especially to start the second half on that first drive?
I think a lot of it is just Brendan Lewis's athleticism. I mean, Jarek Broussard is the 2020 Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year. You can't sleep on him, and they actually have a pair of very good running backs. One that was good before Jarek Broussard was, came back from his second ACL surgery. So it shouldn't surprise anybody that they have the ability to move the ball in the running game. But I think quite a few of those yards on a couple of different plays came from Brendan Lewis finding a way to get past the first level of the defense or scramble out of the way. And, you're going to give up yards like that, just like Colorado did against Arizona State.
Oh, JV with the take in here. Hot take. Urban leaves Jacksonville to take the USC job. Yeah, that's what everyone's thinking, but I don't want to get into that right now, considering I just want to revel in the fact that USC sucks. I really do. So a few other Pac-12 games tonight that happened that were really interesting, and we'll get back into the ASU Colorado. Oh man, I hate these ads that just automatically start playing in your ears when you're trying to click on something. UCLA over Stanford. That was the one. Now, I was moving today. I moved all day and still have energy to do a podcast tonight, and I'm loving life. Oh yeah. All the caffeine and Dr. Pepper in the world over here right now. So 35-24, UCLA beat Stanford. That's who we play next week, and they had 14 points in the fourth quarter to really tighten everything down. Were you able to watch any of the UCLA Stanford game?
Yeah, it's kind of the emergence of Kyle Phillips. He hasn't had very many good games so far in his college career, and this was a marquee one. I think that he adds another dimension to that offense to have a threat at wide receiver. They're very good at tight end. They're very good at running back. They're pretty solid on the offensive line, and even though their quarterback looks banged up, he was able to come back in after sustaining an arm injury, and they had the younger Garbers, Ethan Garbers, in there for a red zone drive. Dorian Thompson Robinson was able to actually come back into the game and throw the touchdown pass that put the game away. And so that was pretty encouraging. If you're a UCLA fan, Stanford looked pretty good on offense, and I don't think UCLA defensively. I don't think they're exactly where Chip Kelly wants the team to be yet, but they also have the ability to create turnovers. They're a very talented team, and they have Herm's number so far.
Well, damn it. That was the next thing I was about to ask. How are we going to stack up again against them next week? And you just kind of answered it right there. Do you think it's going to be the same old, or is ASU actually going to be able to do some things to slow them down and come out with a W?
I think you have to. I think Fresno State kind of showed the model. You got to see if you can get an early lead on them, which will dissuade them from feeding the ball to Charbonnet and Brown. They're two very talented running backs, and then if you have to worry about two really talented running backs, they might catch it in play action with Dulcich, their tight end. Dorian Thompson Robinson is so fast, and so even if you are finding a way to get him out of the pocket, he still might find a way to get some yards on you. But he has in the past been known to turn the ball over repeatedly in situations in which they get behind. But he also has a really short memory. He can make up for a lot of points in a short amount of time as well. I think they had that game where they came back and beat Washington State after being down like 35 in the second half back in 2019. So he's a wild card. He's not a guy that's going to go out and get you 3 to 4 touchdown passes against major competition, but They are good enough to do a little bit of damage everywhere, and they're pretty relentless. And so you just have to find a way, if you're Arizona State, to eliminate costly mistakes on offense and continue to move the ball, keep the ball out of their offense's hands, and capitalize on any points you can get whenever and wherever. And if you build a lead, you're going to be in a much better situation than if they get up on you and they're just able to kind of grind it out through the running game.
And that is great analysis. That's why everybody needs to check out all of Ralph's podcasts that he does. He has all the information you could ever want. And I really appreciate all the time and effort that he's put into it and the information that he gives. And to everybody watching and listening, thank you so much. Go ahead and share and hit the like button. Really appreciate it. And head over to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, and listen there as well, too. Going back to the ASU game and your podcast, and something that you put on the Devil Train that said really resonated with me, and that was, when is Jaden Daniels going to break out? When I first thought of that, I was like, well, okay, hold on, Ralph. Like, his freshman year, we can't really count that, can we? And then I thought about it. Well, okay, he has all that experience freshman year. Comes back next year, new OC, had, 4 games? Okay, I understand that. And then shortened off season, and then they finally come back this year, and it's like, oh, everything's been weird for him. And then I started thinking to myself, everything just seems like excuse after excuse after excuse with Jaden Daniels. And it just is what it is. And when was the last time he threw over 300 yards passing, and when is he going to break out? Now, I understand we have a great rushing attack and an offensive line that is predominantly rush blocking. But he threw for 236 yards tonight. Didn't really put any balls in places where the defense is going to get him. 18 for 25 overall, but no touchdowns too. I mean, Ricky Pearsall had a touchdown. Yeah, that was designed, but I mean, come on. Jaden Daniels, what did you see from him specifically tonight? And do you see him being able to take that leap?
I thought he looked fine. But more and more, the deeper we get into his college career, the more and more that it's getting to the point where he's running out of games to even be available to break out in the way that we're talking about. More and more, you look at what Dorian Thompson-Robinson is doing at UCLA, and you can start to see some similarities. Like, oh, this guy might get you a touchdown with his feet, and he might get you a touchdown through the air, but once you get down into the red zone, you're kind of probably rely on some misdirection, some counter plays, and it's going to be your running backs or your kicker that ultimately ends up getting you the points. He is a very good quarterback, but like I said, I'm watching Oregon State. Oregon State has 42 on USC at the Coliseum right now, and Chance Nolan has 4 touchdown passes. Joey Yellen had 4 touchdown passes against USC. When is it Jaden Daniels' time to have just a game like that? That these seemingly lower tier quarterbacks are able to produce, against a defense full of 5-star players, the way that USC's is. And so Jaden Daniels in high school was dominant. Like the stat lines were cartoonish, whether he was running the ball or passing the ball, whatever it was. And I think one of the things that I said on the Devil Train was I expected that of him going up against UNLV, because that would have been about the tier of player that he was just embarrassing throughout his high school career. He has remained cool, calm, collected. He's got the moxie. He's got the right mindset. He has come back in the face of multiple turnovers to have the game that he had today. So there's a lot of positive there with Jaden Daniels. But at the end of the day, if you were to just stack the last, 6 meaningful contributing starting quarterbacks up against each other, where would you sandwich Jaden Daniels in there as far as production? You could even include the quarterbacks who left Arizona State to have 10,000 yard passing career like Brady White did, or end up in the NFL like Bryce Perkins. If you were to add all of those people together, you probably put him above Blake Barnett. But would he be above Taylor Kelly? Probably not. Would he be above Mike Bercovici? Probably not. And that's a sobering thing because of the amount of hype that he came in with. And unless he starts to produce at that level, then I think there's just going to be a lot of resentment there from the fans, because that's what happens when you get a gap between reality and expectations. It fills with resentment and what if and all that stuff. And even though he could be winning, look at it this way. It is not unfair to criticize Jaden Daniels. And I know this because I just watched Oklahoma win their 11th straight game, in which Spencer Rattler mounted a game-winning drive, and the entire time the fan base was booing him and calling for his backup, when he was in the middle of a game-winning drive, of which it was their 11th straight victory, including multiple victories over top 10 teams. And they are booing him and calling for his backup. So if you're an Arizona State fan and you say, well, it's unfair to question Jaden Daniels, is it? Is it? Because look at what's happening at the real schools. Like, they're winning and they're still pissed off.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember Taylor Kelly over and over and over again, people booing him whenever he went 3 and out or something like that, and people calling for Mike Bercovici. That's not uncommon to do, but from where we're at and where Jaden Daniels was ranked, it's incredible that we're even having this conversation to begin with. Now, my question to you is this because of Herm Edwards' coaching style? Does this have something to do with it, where he likes to coach NFL football at the NCAA level? Is this part of on him? Or, you just brought up Joey Yellen, so part of me thinks like not. So give me your thoughts on that.
I look back. So Herm doesn't have anything to do with the offense. He doesn't have anything to do with anything other than deciding whether to go for it or not on a 4th down field goal attempt. Like, the offense is in Zach Hill's hands. The defense is in Antonio Pierce's hands. He has the ability to overrule them on stuff. But for the most part, if you check in on the sideline, he got a little golf scorecard that he's marking down on in pencil. He's keeping track of stuff, but he's not the one that is actually responsible for the blitz packages, or who Antonio Pierce is going to send, or what Zach Hill is going to call on any given down. So you got to take Herm completely out of it. I don't think he has any responsibility for anything that's going on. So if you look at Zach Hill, I'm a Mountain West football fan. I'm a Wyoming fan. And so I'm plenty of experience with Zach Hill. Happy to have him out of the Mountain West and off of Boise State's sideline. But if you look at his last year at Boise State, he had 3 true freshman quarterbacks, all of which produced at a high level. All true freshmen, all of which produced at a high level, which is part of what made him so attractive to get him out to Arizona State. If he can have success with 3 different true freshmen in Boise State's offense, and you might say, well, that's against Mountain West defenses. Well, ask the rest of the Pac-12 what Mountain West defenses are actually like. If he can have success with 3 true freshmen at Boise State with their talent level against some pretty good defenses, why isn't that happening at Arizona State? And I think the thing that you have to come back to is Jaden Daniels and the receivers. The receivers haven't been what you need them to be, what their recruiting pedigree said that they would be this early on. With the level at which they're recruiting at receiver, there's absolutely no reason Ricky Pearsall or Andre Johnson should ever even be on the field. They're just lowly Arizona 3-stars, but they're out there contributing, blocking, doing everything that you need them to do. It should be the LV Bunkley, Shelton, and Johnny Wilson and Elijah Badger show, which it was a little bit tonight. You definitely have to give those guys credit tonight, but I'm definitely not here to be a downer in the middle of a 22-point win over a team that almost knocked off a team that was top 5 at the
realistic.
time. Yeah, but if you are looking at Jaden Daniels and saying, like, is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? I think we're at the point where it's no. I think we know who he is. He is somebody who takes care of the ball, is dangerous with his feet, and gives the offense every option that would ever need to succeed in any scenario. He is not the guy who we saw on the final drive against Washington State his freshman year, who put the whole team on his back and ran it in for a touchdown. He's not that every single game. That's the outlier. The regression to the mean is a no turnover game in which he puts together about 270 some yards of offense on his own and the team wins. And you should be okay with that, but ultimately you're going to want somebody in there in the Pac-12. By the way, you can't complain because the Pac-12 has had 28 quarterbacks amongst the 12 teams take meaningful snaps. And we're talking non-blowout snaps. And then there's another 3 or 4 quarterbacks, including Trenton Bourguet on top of that. 28 quarterbacks have played meaningful snaps amongst 12 different teams. So Arizona State's incredibly blessed to have had one quarterback that they've been able to rely on for the first 4 games of the season. He's just not going to be 300. He's not going to be Andrew Walter. He's not going to be 350 yards, 4 touchdowns. His whole thing is if he eliminates mistakes in his game, then you're going to have a chance to win. And that's really all you can ask for at this point, because nothing's going to change over the course of the next 8 games. If we see a side of him that we haven't seen before, then I think everybody should be surprised. At this point, I don't think anybody would be like, there it is, I was expecting that. I think at that point, if he grows into somebody who is able to lead this team with his arm, if another team forces him to stay in the pocket, then that's something that we'd be surprised by.
He's heating up.
I might have to change that image now just after this conversation alone. But he did have, I think I just switched off of it. He did have how many yards rushing did he have? Jaden Daniels, there he goes, 75. He did have 75 yards rushing. Add that to the 236 passing, you're about 311 yards of total offense, which you go out
just 100, almost 100 more than your defense gave up. So
yeah,
you'll take it.
But that's what we talk about. And it's what we talked about him from the very first year he showed up and we played Michigan State at Michigan State too. He's got that moxie, what you said, he's patient, he has all that stuff. We're just waiting. And at this point, you're right. I don't know if we can expect it. So what does that mean for his draft stock? Everybody had him coming in as like what, the 4th or 5th best QB, maybe 6 coming into this draft. Do you think he's going to be leaving after this year based on what we've seen? Joe Healy has told us a couple times on the show that he definitely needs to stick around another year and get the experience. What do you think on that?
I think that if he wants to leave, he can leave. We saw Ashari Crosswell do that last week and just say, well, 3 years was always the plan. and I from my time interviewing Jaden Daniels, talking to his family when he was a freshman, when I was around the program, all the time, that has always been the plan, is for him to be done after 3 years. Now he's in a weird situation in which not only could he come back for a fourth year, but a fifth, because of the way that things worked out. But is he going to want to come back to a program that might not have all of the same coaches? That's where it's going to be tough. So if I'm an Arizona State fan, I am looking at this as the last year of Jaden Daniels for any number of reasons. It could be that he decides that he wants to go to the combine, show his stuff in individual workouts and chance it, or it could be that he's gotten his Arizona State degree and he wants to finish his college career in a place where he knows what coaching staff he's going to be going to, because there's a lot of uncertainty with this staff.
It feels almost as if an inevitability with what is coming next year. I mean, obviously we can talk about recruits, we can talk about coaches being off right now, and I really hate diving into this so much, but after last week's loss and people calling for Herm's head, it's hard not to look at the program as a whole. Now, I've been a fan since the 95-96 season, when I grew up there. When I moved away to Michigan between 2000 and 2004 and 5, I could only watch anything that was on an ESPN network, and it was usually against UCLA or USC and Reggie Bush getting blown out 28-0 in the first quarter, So I didn't get a lot of opportunities to watch those games back then, but ever since about 2007, when you could stream stuff on the internet, I was able to watch a whole lot more games. But you look at what Arizona State has been since the Rose Bowl year. A new coach comes in, says all the right things, says be patient. We need to wait. We need to get the recruiting up. We might have a good win here or there for the next 2 seasons, but never really go anywhere. We get the talent. The wheels completely fall off. Everybody calls for the coach's head. We wait a year too long, or we fire the coach and shouldn't. And it's a new cycle all over again. And it's a 4 or 5 year cycle that Arizona State has constantly lived in. We are the sleeping giant that's never going to wake up. And when I just make those comments to you, and from what I've heard on your podcast, you have a lot to say on it. But when I say that to you, the recurring cycle of what Arizona State football is, what are your immediate thoughts and reactions to that?
I don't like it when people get into that, like there's a curse mindset or whatever. P.S. That's a 15-point win for Oregon State at USC. So that's going to be fascinating. If you look at it right now, with University of Arizona probably not going to win a game, with Colorado's offense being completely inefficient, with Utah being at one point today, it looked like Utah was going to be 1-3. They are not good. They can't pass protect. They're on their second quarterback. They just had another one quit. Arizona State could readily run through the Pac-12 and go 11-1 and have had the fan base call for Herm Edwards' job 1/4 of the way into that. So this has the opportunity to set up to be one of the most unique seasons in Arizona State football history. But so I don't like it when the fans get to the point where they're thinking about how it's all going to fall apart before it's fallen apart yet. Everything right now is set up for Arizona State to have a very special season, so long as they control what they can control. They finally have the most talented team in the Pac-12 South. The biggest hurdle to not winning the South outright is UCLA, and UCLA lost to Fresno State. It's not like they're invincible. And so I would just say that, it'd be better to talk about how snake bit this team is once the snake actually bites, because there's no point in anticipating it now. Sure. You might as well throw all your eggs in the hope basket, get ready to get hurt again, because this could be the year where they do something truly, truly special. And it could be with deficiencies at quarterback and deficiencies at wide receiver. There could, and kicker, and as far as team discipline, there could be a ton of stuff to complain about, but you could be in the situation where it won't matter because you are the most talented team. You have a quarterback that doesn't turn the ball over. You have an extremely mature defense taking advantage of the fact that so many people were able to come back, and you have so many other teams down and out who aren't sure what's going on at the quarterback position, or whose recruiting has fallen off, or who, like USC, had to can their coach in the middle of the season. Things are set up to potentially be really, really special. And so I think that's where the focus should be. I would be all in Phoenix Suns style, like just ride it out for whatever it is for the rest of 2021, even if they lose, because they are set up to be able to compete for and win the South half of the conference. And then once you get into that game, anything can happen. Because if you look at it this way, Oregon is the class of the North. They just got a 22-point win over University of Arizona. That's the same margin of victory for Arizona State, which, based on its talent, is the class of the South against a team that can't really move the ball and is about as equipped offensively as Arizona. And so but you're in good company. You're doing the right thing. You just had a blowout win. Stay focused, keep it up, and a month from now, we could be talking about what it looks like if Arizona State's able to string together another 2 to 3 wins. People be making plans to go to Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas for the Pac-12 championship. So I don't know. I say forget all that and jump in 2 feet, get ready to dive in, go underwater, be all in.
Boom shakalaka!
Diving all the way in. I am all about that. I mean, I do understand why fans are so pissed off and why I was very worried going into this game, because, again, we don't know what's coming up. We have no idea what kind of allegations are really going to come out. I said this last week. If Baylor can get hit with nothing, how can really almost any other school ever get hit with a penalty ever again?
Yeah, you just have to have people. So the difference is everybody loved Art Briles. Everybody on that coaching staff loved Art Briles. The problem with Arizona State is the issues were coming from within. They're toast. Like, let's be honest. The whole staff is gone. It could go higher than that. It could get to the athletic director level. It's over. It's just a matter of what they can do in what is essentially a lame duck season. Everybody always likes to talk about, like, well, our backs are against the wall. Their backs are literally against the wall. This is the last stand. They have the chance to do something really cool before they all go out together, because what happened was people within the program blew the whistle, and now they're talking to the NCAA, and the NCAA has the ability to penalize you based on whatever those people produce, especially if they bring extra evidence with it. And everything that I know about what is going on behind the scenes at Arizona State is it had a lot to do with some of the people who were on staff in the athletic department having an issue, not with anybody within the coaching staff, though there were many issues with Antonio Pierce, but Ray Anderson. And so had all of them had a healthy working relationship, there's a really good chance that not a lot of this goes down. But Arizona State behind the scenes has already kind of blamed Todd Graham leftovers for some of what's going on. And that's just not necessarily the case. You had a work culture in which you had a bunch of employees who didn't enjoy some things that were going on, all complained to each other, all moved on. And then when the time came, they all, like, this isn't 1 or 2 people blowing the whistle. This is like 8 to 10 people who are all, and now you have coaches on suspension for things that they very likely did under some sort of direction that are probably going to tell the NCAA that exact thing. And so it's over for this staff. And I think that they know that. I think that they would have to. What one other time in the history of college football have 3 position coaches been placed on paid leave? Never.
Didn't even happen in Arizona with DeAndre Ayton and all that. Yeah.
Right. And they had somebody go to jail. This is not that serious. Well, I mean, somebody used Jaden Daniels' mother's credit card to buy a flight, and she had the charges reversed. So either she committed credit card fraud or somebody on the staff caused her to do so or stole her identity, which means a crime was literally committed. Like someone literally committed a crime. So It's not like it's just NCAA rules. We're dealing with actual like credit card fraud amongst the coaching staff that we have to discuss and figure out whether or not that's legitimate. Like there could actually still be legal involvement. And then you genuinely have situations where other teams could consider legal action, civil legal action against Arizona State for some of the choices that they made as far as recruiting and having recruits around and stuff like that might have had a secondhand effect on their team. There's a reason that all the other assistants in the Pac-12 are super pissed off because in their head, before all the truth of the matter has come out, there are certain situations in which they believe they were negatively impacted by some of the things that Arizona State was doing. You know, there's 2 or 3 people working on a story right now that may or may not ever come out having to do with the fact that Arizona State missed 3 games and whether or not that had something to do with Arizona State not properly contact tracing so that they would have more players available to them when they played USC last year. Like there is so much going on and so much that's going to be investigated that it is not like, it's just not even going to be possible to retain people on this staff. And because of the arrangement in which Ray Anderson hired his, I don't know if adults still use the term best friend, but he hired his longtime friend to do the job. He's not going to fire him. So they would probably have to go together, which means wholesale starting over, which could impact other programs at Arizona State as well. If you end up having to bring somebody in from the outside as an athletic director, and then they go around, evaluating what they would do. So like the possibilities are endless for the fallout. I think people should be a lot more hopeful for an 11-1 season than they should be for any of these coaches coming back in 2022.
Well, shoot, man, I'm not hopeful for anything now. That was a lot of stuff that I hadn't heard. I mean, I've heard rumors on like little whispers on Twitter from kind of unverified people. So you hear something like that, it just takes the wind out of your sails for your fandom, because a lot of fans out there that are calling for Herm Edwards are people that are just passionate, and people are passionate in different ways and they show it in different ways. I talked to Jedi ASU after the first win, and we were both down about it. You talked to Joe Healy after the second one, and UNLV. It's a different situation. People on fans are expressing the way they feel they need to. But again, it ultimately comes down to us not knowing what's going to happen next, or really not knowing when we're going to be good next. And I think that's the real part. When are we going to be good after this? Like Herm Edwards, new AD, all that stuff, fine, we can deal with it. But when are we going to legitimately be able to become not a powerhouse? I think a perennial top 25 team is more realistic.
Yeah, I would say that one of the more recent rules, as far as grad transferring in the transfer portal, that could be hurting a lot of teams in college football. I mean, you're seeing teams like San Diego State be able to compete with just about anyone. Well, that's because they have Greg Bell at running back, who was a 4-star out of Arizona Western, who was at Nebraska. And then they have like a 6'6" guy they got off the Alabama roster. Like the transfer portal has created this opportunity for some of the smaller schools to have these game breakers that just didn't have the window to play that they would have wanted. And so you're going to get superstar performances in the Mountain West, in the Big Sky, and stuff like that. And the one thing about the state of Arizona that has always been true is it's where people come to make a living, to get theirs, to make their way. It's the wild, wild west. The transfer portal's existence helps put Arizona State on a little bit more of a level playing field with everybody else, because in the way that they used to try to get ready-made guys out of JUCO under Todd Graham, this will be a destination. This will absolutely be a destination for players who weren't in the best situation before, but want a chance to bounce back. And I think that Arizona State should really embrace that as part of their identity, because that's the identity of the state anyway. And everybody's from somewhere else coming here to get theirs. Like, Arizona State should market itself as the number one transfer portal destination for players who want to come in and make an impact right away. And I think that if they do that, that you won't see the bottom completely fall out from 2021 to 2022 if there is wholesale change amongst the coaching staff.
Forward thinking. I remember listening to, I think it was you and George Reister talking on what the Pac-12 should do before the NIL came out for everybody, and or maybe it was you and Brad and Joe. I'm not 100% sure, but you said specifically on there, maybe this is the time for Arizona State to take the leap forward and, you know, be the leader in trying to get players NIL. So the forward thinking that I hear from you, I really enjoy, because you just had me going down and now I'm starting to creep back up again. And change can be a good thing. Change can absolutely be a good thing, regardless of what it is in anybody's life or in sports. It can be a good thing. Speaking of change, something that doesn't change is we have a final score, 41-19, Arizona losing. I hope everybody listening really, truly just appreciates how much the team down south is losing, and USC losing today. We already talked about USC or UCLA, Stanford. Utah, again, looked anemic to start out the day. I was able to watch some of it. You said that looked like they weren't even going to win that game, but they pulled it out 24-13. And then tonight in overtime, we saw Washington and Cal, and I was really pulling for Cal. Before we let you go and start wrapping it up a little bit here, what else did you notice around the Pac-12 or around the country that really caught your eye?
Real lack of star power, real lack of game breakers outside of certain guys like Drake London at USC. Not a whole lot of guys that you can just depend on to go out and get you that first down or something like that. I think 2 years ago, you could have probably pinpointed 10 guys and maybe one or two on each team, you know, even like a guy like Isaiah Hodgins at Oregon State. Now it's just sort of, you know, who is going to show up on any given night to make those plays. I think that makes the Pac-12 a little bit more interesting, but also a little bit more volatile from week to week and a little bit harder to predict. University of Washington, in the first 2 weeks, they did not give the ball to Sean McGrew or Kamari Pleasant, two of their running backs who were responsible for probably, 40% of their rushing production and scoring last year. They didn't give the ball to either one of those two one time. Week 3 hits, and all of a sudden Sean McGrew has 2 touchdowns and Kamari Pleasant leads them in touches. And then today, Sean McGrew scores as well. So you're starting to see some teams evolve, do some more common sense things, dip into their bag of tricks a little bit more. But there are not very many people in the Pac-12 who you would look at and say, that guy in particular is going to be able to do something on their own. I think University of Arizona maybe would come the closest to having somebody like that in the South, and that's Jamari Joyner, and he hasn't played all year, and he might not play. He's got bad feet. So I think that being as deep offensively and having as much options as Arizona State does offensively, and when they get Chip Trayanum back, and when Johnny Wilson stops dropping passes, and when they stop forcing the ball to him, because you'll notice I think a lot of Jaden Daniels' overthrows actually come to a 6'7" wide receiver. I think once Arizona State, I think Arizona State's in the same place that everybody else is in just trying to figure out what works. But I think they've got more up their sleeve than most teams. Most teams don't have the depth. Even Colorado, Levante Chenault probably would have been that for them, but he just got suspended for the 3rd time. He's not even part of this offense. Brendan Rice isn't that for them this year either. Britton Covey at Utah is, he's a kind of a possession guy and a game breaker on special teams, but he's not special outside of that. And so Arizona State is going to need to take advantage of the fact that this is like the most vanilla and least star-studded group of players within the conference that maybe I've ever seen. And this includes Oregon. Like you look at what Oregon did today, it's just more of the same that they've done for the last 3 years. I don't think any receiver on the team had more than 4 catches because they don't have like a go-to guy. Johnny Johnson is a senior. He probably had 2 or 3 catches today like he always does. They're not CJ Verdell could maybe be that for them, but it's just not. This year, there are not very many people who have the ability to just take the game into their own hands. There's no Christian McCaffrey. There's nothing like that. So, all right, what do we got? Oh,
I got Oregon receiving 1 reception, 3 receptions. Johnny Johnson 1.
That's fun. And on that Chris Hudson 29-yarder, they got a 15-yard penalty. So, yeah, it's just there's nobody really within the Pac-12 right now that should scare you. You're going to have to face Drake London at some point. Everybody does. But as long as you can score on the other side, you're going to be fine. Just Oregon State just destroyed the Trojans at the Coliseum. I don't even know when the last time Oregon State won at USC. So I would say there is nothing there based on what I have seen. There's nothing and nobody to fear. And if you're just worried about yourself, then you're probably going to be able to do some pretty special things in this conference.
One of my other good podcaster friends, Eric from Blazers Uprise, is a huge Oregon State fan. So we're going to definitely have him on sometime as well, too. Maybe when we travel up to Oregon State again. And then next year again, when we go up there, we'll have him on.
It seems to be every year, right?
It's just an every year thing with us, and that's fine. We're all used to getting hurt. We all have Stockholm syndrome from being Arizona State fans or Arizona fans, and I'm digging the Suns hat and the Suns shirt that you're wearing over there. Are the Suns a 60-win squad in your eyes? Do you think, Ralph?
No, I don't think so, and I don't think they need to be.
It is.
I'm very worried about the fan base this next year because they haven't had to handle success. And I don't think that they remember what the 3 years in the wake of the 1992-93 trip to the finals was. It was 3 very good teams that had a ton of drama, but were still a threat come playoff time, especially in 1994 and in 1995, having a lead on the Rockets in both of those playoff series. So I would say that the more that you temper expectations and the more that you just appreciate the fact that we have competitive basketball, the less anxiety you're going to have, because once you are good, you become a target. It's just a completely different. It's just, you're just living a completely different life as a team. Like the way that Suns fans treat the Utah Jazz, which I'm all for and participate in regularly, that's you now. That's going to be people all over the internet coming after you and your team. Because before, you weren't even worth thinking about. You weren't even worth their breath. Now people are going to have all sorts of bad opinions on your team. And so I hope you can handle it. And I hope that they enjoy the fact that this team is going to be competitive, because these windows do come and go. People act like the Suns were just good for 20 years. They weren't. There were 2 very specific dips that they had to build back from before the hole got too deep. And you just became a perennial like lottery laughing stock or whatever. So this window of them being good could be 2 to 3 years, maybe 4 or 5 years max. The stuff that happens with the teams like the Spurs is incredibly rare, where you have like 18 Atlanta Braves style, always good no matter
Division
what, always in the conference. Yeah. That stuff is just not typical. So, or you could just be the Jazz. Like you could be the 5th best team in the West forever, and that's kind of maddening in its own right. So I would just say, like, enjoy being good. It's going to be fun. Watch more games, spend less time on the internet in the wake of those games. And you'll be able to make it through, because it's definitely a different burden rooting for a good team.
I completely agree with your take about not needing to get to 60 wins or being able to. It's different when you're playing from behind. When I was on Suns Jam session earlier this week, they had a question where, what player you think is going to rise up to the occasion, and what player do you think might step back and flounder a little bit? And I said Mikal Bridges. And I said Mikal Bridges because, look how everybody is hyping him up. Oh, if he adds this extra move or does more of this in the mid range, he can be like KD. Then 2K comes out and gives him an 86 rating. So I just think that the bar is being set so extremely high that if people, players, the team, whatever, doesn't reach that, it's going to get ugly, like the Fire Herm crowd or the trade DeAndre Ayton crowd, which I was a part of last year for different reasons, but I completely agree. Real quick, before we let you go, were you a fan of the Arizona State gold uniforms tonight? Bringing them back.
They looked, it's very rare that this happens, but they actually looked worse on the field than they did in all the promo photos and everything like that. I found myself wishing that it was an all maroon setup with gold sleeves, or even, God forbid, all gold. But I just thought it was super extra bold, and I'm glad that they won in them so that people have positive memory, because it'd be one of those things like at U of A back in, what was it, 2016, where U of A blew Arizona State out in the second half, and then all of a sudden you were never allowed to wear alternates ever again.
No silver ever.
So yeah, so if you're going to get wild with your jerseys, as long as you go out there and win, people will have positive feelings about them. I love the sleeves, and I love being bold. But I think overall, this is Colorado had to be out there being like, I thought we played Minnesota last week. I thought it was just a little bit too much Golden Gopher. I thought they got a little too close to the Iowa State line earlier this year. They got to find a way to do some of this stuff while keeping their identity. And I feel like they definitely did that at the end of the Nike days with the Desert Ice and the Desert Chrome and stuff like that, where it still was definitely like, okay, this is an Arizona State flavor. We can't compare it to anybody else. But this is this definitely had me looking at them the whole time like, wow, this is a bold choice and very much reminds me of the Golden Gophers.
And the best Arizona State uniform of all time was, I believe, almost 4 years ago with the Eno Benjamin run when he was behind DeMario and they were wearing the tan salute to service ones with had the red undershirts. Those were definitely one of my favorites of all time. I was a fan of it. I loved the bigger Sparky on the side of the helmet. I thought that was cool. I love the addition of the stripe that they've finally brought back. It seems like full time because they've had the stripe in the middle every single game. So I enjoy that. I liked the gold, but it did remind me of Minnesota a little bit too much. And I really liked the ASU logo with like the 3 lines going through them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was really cool too. Ralph Amsden, thank you so much for coming on. Where can everybody find you on your 1,001 podcast and Twitter?
I mean, I'm around. I write columns and do social media for Arizona Varsity. That's a Rivals affiliate that cover a lot of high school sports. And then Pac-12 Apostles and unafraidshow.com. I run unafraidshow.com, and I am co-host of the Pac-12 Apostles. It's probably a little bit more applicable. We do another show called Right or Wrong, but it's just complete nonsense. So if you enjoy nonsense, you'd like that. If you just want the straight football stuff, Pac-12 Apostles is the place to get it. And then I listen to pretty much everything that anybody makes anywhere in the state of Arizona. So I'm always happy at Ralph Amsden on Twitter. If you want to talk about what somebody else made or want me to check something out, I'm pretty accessible and always around. So you can find me pretty easily.
And don't get into a fight with him. He will dig up absolutely everything on you. Don't do it. I think I had it happen to me before back in the day, but we're not going to get into that anymore. We're past that. Ralph, thank you so much for coming on. Everybody, thank you again for sticking around with He's on Fire podcast and listening and subscribing. I appreciate you. I appreciate our listeners listening on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Please head over to Anchor and donate to the podcast if you so choose to keep this going. We've got some big things in the works. We're going to be right back tomorrow night. Cardinals and Jaguars. I hope it's not a trap game like everybody's calling it, but we're gonna find out. Me, my co-host Jay, and Amit will be back. Arizona State wins. Let's revel in that a little bit. Let's enjoy it. We're supposed to win. That's fine. Next week's game is going to be the tell-all for everybody. He's on Fire podcast. Thank you so much for coming out. Good night, everybody.
Urbanich sets, looks up, and it is caught! Down strong! Irving throws it alley. Oh! He puts it down! He puts it down! They're getting a little wobbly. But a downfield shot.